Hi, everyone. This is the recording for Friday, April the 30th. Originally, this was supposed to be a new section on the future of Latin America. But as you know, I have not finished the discussion on the material regarding US-Latin America relations. So I'm going to use this time to finish that. And on Monday, live, we are going to just cover what we need to cover regarding the future of Latin America in one session that Monday before the midterm on Wednesday. It's okay. We are doing totally fine in terms of material. I am not shooting for quantity, it's more about quality. And well, speaking about the future is always difficult because even economists, despite of contrary to belief, we don't have a crystal ball. Anyway, so I am going to start sharing my screen so I can continue. Something important that we have not talked about yet, and I just want to touch on this very briefly because, again, we're running out of time. It has to do with drug trafficking, and this is in the context of US-Latin America relationships. For the most part, most scholars agree that the so-called bilateral anti-drug agenda, that means collaboration between Colombia and the US to reduce the traffic of drugs from Latin America, mainly Colombia, but not only Colombia, to the US, has been, let me highlight this, remarkably unsuccessful. When you think about the amount of consumption of drugs in the US, the increased consumption of drugs in the US, the increased availability, well, clearly there is something not working very effectively. The income in Colombia from drugs is pretty stable, despite the fact of all these shows on YouTube about the leaders of the narco-traffic movement. I mean, the structure of narco-traffic is such that you may be able to go after the head of one organization, but they are horizontal structures. So very quickly, you are going to have either somebody from the organization moving up and take the leadership, or another one horizontally moving in to take the space or the gaps left by, Pablo Escobar or El Chapo or whoever you want to talk about. So not only that, institutions are very weak. I'm talking about police forces, military. These groups are powerful and they can penetrate and infiltrate and corrupt many of these institutions. So this is really not good news because, well, parallel to drug trafficking, we know that there are many other more serious crimes associated with this business, than these have to do with human trafficking, kidnapping, murders, and all sorts of violence and other problems associated with this business. So it's not just about an issue of public health, or it's not only about an issue of illegal trafficking. No, I'm talking about the loss of human lives. This business implies significant cost to the population in Colombia, in Latin America, and also in the US, as we know. The other problem that is important to realize here is that using the excuse of fighting drug trafficking, the US has been able to take spaces and take advantage of some of these problems in Latin America, particularly Colombia, to establish a wider, stronger presence in the area. Just a few years ago, there was this news where, I don't remember if it was Hugo Chavez, or it was already President Maduro. But anyway, they were complaining because Colombia has always been well, not always, but recently, in recent years, has always been friendly to the US because of this collaboration and because of other reasons. But the complaint was that the Colombian government had made these declarations according to which they were going to allow a military base to be established in Colombian territory. Venezuela saw this as a threat because they saw, oh, okay, this is the beginning of an occupation by the US, just like they did in Nicaragua, just like they did in Cuba. Now it's our turn. So it was a major scandal. And as far as I know, no military base was established. But the point is that it is very clear to see that the US has a very strong interest in expanding its presence in South America. And Colombia is a prime target because, again, they have been friendly and the relationships with them is very strong. I mean, we have DEA agents, Drug Enforcement Agency agents, CIA, FBI, and many other police forces in Colombia already, either undercover or totally open. The point is that the relationship is strong and they want to increase it because geopolitically, relative to Venezuela, is an important area. Anyway, let me move on now to this section that has to do with what's happening now, which we have been talking about anyway already. But the new context of international politics basically calls this or it implies a relationship that has as a background, relationship between the US and Latin America has a background, the promotion and the defense of human rights, liberty, freedom, peace, democratic values in the continent. And that's totally fine. I mean, I'm all for that. The problem from the Latin American point of view is that they should be left alone. If for some reason there is turmoil, if for some reason there is, disputes, tension in a particular country or in a particular region of Latin America, the US shouldn't be intervening. I mean, they are sovereign countries. They should be able to figure it out on their own, sometimes diplomatically, sometimes, unfortunately, in a more violent way. But the point is that many Latin American countries are going to say, hey, leave us alone. We can figure this out. We are grown-ups now, right? And also, there is a new context of international economics. It's not just the politics, it's the economics part. Because now all of this relationship is infused with this promotion of neoliberal policies and the idea that if Latin America doesn't get into the globalization train, the train is going to take off and Latin America is going to get behind. So, the communism, at least the Soviet style is over, Soviet Republic collapsed, there is no Berlin Wall anymore, and so forth. Now, it looks like the world is breaking into blocks. You have the European Union, mainly led by Germany. You have the Asian tigers. I think Japan is in that section. Obviously, China by itself is becoming a superpower. In the Americas, we have, the new agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the US. And some people are thinking that perhaps Brazil could become a new economic power in South America. That has not happened, but obviously is the largest economy, the largest country, and that's how things are looking like. Anyway, I also want to make note of this box, which is very important when we talk about relationships between Latin America and the US. Normally, we think, again, of Latin America as this monolithic entity where everybody is the same and, it's just Latin America and the US. But the reality is that Latin America is comprised by, as you know, many, many countries with many, many different characteristics, different sizes, different challenges, different amount of resources, and so forth. So the foreign policy of the US is very clear in this, in making this regional differentiation. I'm looking at this box on the screen, guys. So, for example, Mexico and Canada, for obvious reasons, are important in terms of border security. You know, the Canadians are not facing that problem too much because very few people go all the way to Canada to get into the US, although some of them do. Most of the migrants, especially illegal or undocumented people, are coming through the Mexican border. So this is why Mexico is this bridge, and this is a very important role of the Mexican government and the Mexican population, because you know, many people establish presence in Mexico just with the only purpose to eventually cross to the US. Anyway, Mexico and Canada is one particular group. Now, when you think about the Caribbean countries, Central American and Panama, the importance for the US is more on geostrategic, geopolitical points of interest. Meaning the particular location is important. You know, the Panama Canal obviously saves a lot of money and time because the ships don't have to go all the way to the south of you know, Chile and Argentina. They can just cross from the Atlantic to the Pacific back and forth, and that's huge in terms of making commerce cheaper. But also remember, we have Cuba that obviously, you know, the Castro family is you know, moving away. Actually, Raúl Castro just a couple of weeks ago, or less than that, finally stepped down as the president of the Communist Party. But anyway, still, it's a communist place. So we as a matter of foreign policy, we need to keep an eye on them, particularly because, well, they are receiving help from communist countries, including China and Russia, even today. Not at the extent as they used to, especially the Soviets, but they're still receiving assistance. By the way, 2-3 years ago, I was in Havana, in the capital of Cuba, and I was so impressed, guys. I have to share this with you, but I don't know if you know this, but Cuba is the country in the world where you can find the highest number of consulates and embassies in the world. You know, and normally these embassies and these consulates are like big mansions, big houses, nice places, right? Well, I didn't know this, but I saw, you know, we were traveling in this bus, and I saw in the distance a very large complex of not one building. It was like a huge amount of buildings, and they were surrounded by this fence. And I said, you know, what is that? And, you know, this is the embassy area. And by the way, that's the Soviet embassy. So what do you mean? Yeah, they have a city inside Cuba still today, where you have a lot of, you know, people from Russia living there. Anyway, this is obviously inherited by the, you know, Cold War era, when the Cold War was at, you know, at its peak, and the Russians and the Soviets were investing significantly in Cuba. Not anymore, but obviously the buildings and the presence is still there. Anyway, the Andean region, I'm talking about Colombia, Bolivia, Venezuela, and Ecuador. These 4 Andean countries are important because obviously drug trafficking, and at some extent oil, the case of Venezuela, right? And finally, Brazil, Argentina, and Chile are important for a different reason. Brazil is the largest economy in Latin America, and Argentina and Chile are very, very large too. So this is about size and economic power. One of them may take over as leader, you know, of perhaps in the future a bloc. Right now, the concept of Latin America integration is still a dream, but perhaps one day one of these countries is able to join you know, to achieve this goal by joining forces with other countries, and that could be an interesting thing to see. Anyway, let me also move on to this. I already tried to explain that many people in Latin America feel and see the US as abusive, authoritarian, imperialistic, and so forth. And normally, when they talk about this in terms of economics, this is a term I took from one of the readings. I forgot which ones, but this is the 4 ways to skin a cat. So the first thing that we in the US are doing to extract wealth from Latin America is in the form of royalty and license payments. I already made the case that the US is interested in developing a supranational intellectual property mechanism to protect and all these, inventions and innovation. But even today, through the WTO and other mechanisms, the US receives a significant amount of royalty and license fee payments from Latin American countries for the use of technology, technical assistance, and many other things that we share with Latin America in exchange for these royalty and license payments. It's a big amount of money. Here I have all numbers. I honestly don't know what the size of this is now. Maybe in the 10 billion range, which is significant. But anyway, this is probably not the most important one. Here is another important, this is in a bigger way. Remember, we have a significant amount of multinational corporations headquartered in the US with presence in Latin American countries. Most of them, are in the raw materials industry. And I already mentioned the ones in ag, Chiquita, Del Monte, but we also have construction companies, we also have paper companies, and not only the US, but the Canadians too, and the Europeans too. The point is that all these profits that multinational corporations in Latin America are making typically are repatriated. They are sent back to the US because, of course, the stakeholders or the stockholders are demanding these dividend payments, right? So the CEO is obviously under a huge amount of pressure to do whatever it takes for this multinational corporation to perform and meet the expectations of these stockholders, producing this level of profit. And this implies a leaking, a bleeding of resources moving from Latin America to the US. So that's the second one, right? Then you have interest payments. Remember, the international debt, the debt crisis is not over. Many Latin American countries are, as I already mentioned, paying still today significant amount of dollars and as a proportion of GDP to the US banks or the government for debt that, 2 generations ago, or at least 1 generation ago, generated. So that's the third. So you have license and royalty fees. That's number 1. Then you have profit repatriation, number 3. Then you have number 3 and number 2. Number 3, interest payments. And number 4, well, international trade. Remember, we already talked about this. We preach free trade, but we don't practice free trade. At least it's not reciprocal. We demand that Latin America lowers tariffs. We demand that Latin America opens up to international trade. We demand that Latin America doesn't offer subsidies, but we do all those things. And because of that, we are able to extract wealth because we are able to take over markets, like in the case of corn in Mexico, or coffee, or other markets, increasing the penetration of American companies, overtaking Latin American markets. So the point is that income is transferred upward and outward. Many people in Latin America feel that through this mechanism, the US is leaving the poor, let me read this, leaving the poor to struggle in marginal micro enterprises, marginal land, informal unemployment, street vendors, street performers, landless peasants, and if lucky, some handouts from projects from non-governmental organizations, NGOs, right? So many people in Latin America, especially those that are not receiving the benefits of technology in medicine, in construction, and in general, the benefits of modernization, they feel that globalization is a program of and for the rich. This is interesting, guys. This is interesting because if you remember, it was Hernando de Soto on that video of 8 minutes talking about poverty in Latin America. He spoke about terrorism. You remember that? When he said, you know, it's not that people are mean or that they want to start bombing places just because. No, the real problem is that people feel left out with no opportunities to participate in the legal system. In the case of Latin America, we already talked about this. You know, you have the paper wall, bureaucracies. We also have the property rights, no legal identity, no title of property. And then you face the major actor, which is the US, practicing these 4 ways to skin the cat, right? And then you have all these interventionist policies and events, historical events, Chile, Nicaragua, Argentina, taking place even today in Latin, and of course Latin American people say, like, what's going on here? Leave us alone, right? And again, I'm just trying to give you a sense of why sometimes you're going to find some people in Latin America feeling this way, guys. It's not meant to vilify, to demonize us in the US. It's just, facts. This is what happened, and this is why people react that way, right? Anyway, final comment. I don't remember if I have mentioned this guy, Noam Chomsky, political scientist, but not by training. Actually, Noam Chomsky is a linguist, I believe, from the MIT. But for many in political science, he is considered one of the pillars, intellectual pillars of this century, well, the past century, the 20th century. But, the reason I want to mention Noam Chomsky here is because he thinks, and this is a quote, that the free market is socialism for the rich. Like, what do you mean, Dr. Chomsky, right? Well, there is a lot of things to unpack on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words, right? The free market is socialism for the rich. There is so many things behind this sentence, but in this particular context, what I want to say is the following: 2 things. Number 1, we live in the US and we take advantage of the benefits produced by a powerful economy, a powerful military, and a powerful diplomatic apparatus, right? Sometimes we don't see what happens to achieve the goals that produce these benefits. And sometimes it's not that we don't see, sometimes it's that we don't want to see, because it's painful to recognize that it's costing lives, that in some cases is costing the environment, that sometimes is producing significant disparities between what the rich and the poor. So Noam Chomsky says there is a cost, to if you live in a society like ours, there is a cost where, if you dissent, if you speak up against these foreign policy practices, you're going to be considered a traitor. You're going to be considered a dissident. You're going to be saying, yo, that's so anti-USA. You are not an American. So you are not going to end up in a concentration camp like Latin Americans did. You are not going to be tortured, no, but you are going to be in a life that's going to be difficult in many other ways. You're going to be marginalized at the school, vilified, you're going to be ignored, ridiculized, and many other things by sometimes even your family members, right? So many people prefer to either pretend, look the other way, or just ignore and move forward, right? So this is important, guys, because again, I think as US citizens, we also bear some responsibility because we are electing the leaders making these decisions, right? And if we really are thinking about a global village where Earth is the house of everybody, and we are really open to races and cultures, and we are really serious about this quest for diversity, equity, inclusion, not just here in our community, but globally, we need to pay attention to these things. We need to pay attention to these things because it's very nice to, once again, walk into the room, flip the switch, and hey, electricity, water, you know, all of these things that we take for granted. But in many cases, they come to, they're a product of a higher cost, not just economic cost, but human cost that we just don't see. We just don't see, or environmental cost, right? Anyway, the second part that has to do with this statement is this, and this is kind of an interesting argument. It goes something like this. So when the economy, you know, and this is again in the context of you know, the communist or the socialist ideas and neoliberal stuff, right? Free market versus state intervention, right? Think about this. When the economy is doing well, when the unemployment rate is low, the rate of economic growth is, you know, high and sustained, when you see progress in terms of innovation, technological improvement, things are going well, most people are going to say, hey, government, you hands off. Don't mess this up, which is reasonable, right? So don't start taxing, don't start regulating, don't start messing up with this magical, wonderful market. Okay, all right, no disagreement there. The problem is this: when things are not going well, when the economy starts malfunctioning, when something happens, when something goes wrong, for example, the most recent case, the 2007-2009, the housing crisis that turned out, you know, a huge financial crisis. What happens? Everybody cries for help. The financial industry, the banks, the insurance companies, the real estate companies, right? And, you know, we also had troubles with the car industry, with the airline industry, all these private entities, right? So what happens? Oh, we call the federal government to bail them out. We need a rescue package in the billions, perhaps trillions of dollars to rescue private companies, to pay private employees, and to pay salaries of CEOs and, you know, the whole corporate structure. The question is, who pays for these mega rescue packages? Taxpayers. We do. You know, the government is not other than a collection of people, right? And rules. An institution. But the government doesn't have a pulse. The government doesn't eat. The government doesn't get sick. The government doesn't make or pays. It's us. It's just people. It's people, right? So the question is, why, I'm going back to this sentence. The free market is socialism for the rich. If things go well, we don't want the government to intervene. When things go wrong, we have to rescue them. And the rescue comes in the form of packages financed by the taxpayers, the rest of the people that had nothing to do with the poor decision-making of these companies, or that has nothing to do with, well, whatever went wrong, but we pay anyway, right? So this is an interesting argument in the sense that, okay, all right, perhaps we are looking at this in a too, this analogy is either white or black, but there is a lot of shades of gray here that have to be considered. Not everything is right or left, white or black, right or wrong. There is this corridor. There is this hole between these always extremes that we seem to ignore, and I'm not sure how and why this happens. We probably, if we sit together, if we talk about these things, I think we're going to discover more common elements than differences. Because at the end of the day, what we all human beings is the same thing. Hernando de Soto spoke about this. We want the same thing, whether you are rich or poor, whether you live in rural areas or urban areas, whether you live in Europe or the US, it doesn't matter. We are all human beings. We want the same thing. We need, food and shelter, a decent paid job, all of these things that we all, deserve and want. So perhaps we should sit down, talk, discuss these things rather than just placing labels in our forehead. Hey, this guy is a communist. Oh, this is a neoliberal junkie. Like that doesn't work. That's not helpful. It's not helpful. We probably need to figure out better ways to communicate to solve these issues, guys, because, well, so far they are not being very helpful in terms of building the world that I'm hoping to leave to my children, and I hope you guys are thinking about leaving to your offspring as well. The world is great, especially for us, because we are in the minority, in the privileged minority that can travel, that we have a shirt to wear, watch, this wonderful technology, education, that we speak 2 or 3 languages, that we are healthy, that we have a job. All of these things, believe me, only a very few, a very small number of people in the world can have. And to me, well, that's not right. We can do better. We can do better as a human species, guys. So let's work on that. I want to stop now. I will see you guys on Monday during the live session for the brief discussion of the future of Latin America. All right. Bye, everyone. See you soon.